Good morning, friends, and welcome to a Hasty Podcast. I'm your cyborg, Weston Hasty. You're listening to a Hasty Podcast, and in today's cast of the pods, what do you call an episode of a podcast? In this pod? In this cast? Obviously, you can say in this podcast, but come on, we gotta simplify it down to a single syllable, do we not? That's how nicknames work. We have to slash this thing into something smaller. In this cast, I think that's it, right? It'd be in this cast because podcast, right? Pod is a modifier to the word cast because it comes from iPods back in the day when iPods used to be the way to receive a podcast, right? The iPod popularized the entire medium. I almost said genre, but I guess it would be medium. Am I wrong about that? Someone who's smarter than me can fill me in. So, but I think that's what popularized the entire medium. And although no one really has an iPod these days, because even if you were using an Apple device, you'd probably listen to your podcasts via your smartphone, not a dedicated iPod device like you used to back in the day, iPods, MP3 players, that kind of thing. But, so if pod modifies cast, I guess this is a cast. In this cast, we're going to be talking about SOMA. I know this seems a little random, especially coming out on December 1st. If I'm not mistaken, this cast will be coming out on December 1st. I am trying to make sure I really lock down my episode recording schedule. I'm trying to be on top of things. I'm trying to get more on top of things. So this is December. So it's the holiday season, Christmas season if you celebrate Christmas, other things if you celebrate other things. But I'll tell you what it's not. It is not spooky season. That was October. That was 2 months ago now. Spooky season is long over, and yet today on December 1st, the beginning of our December Christmassy sort of holiday season. Yeah, I'm very good at words, guys. I'm very good at words. I'm going to decide to talk about SOMA, a spooky game. It's a spooky game. I finished it. I beat it on stream several days ago now. But I've been meaning to talk about it because I haven't talked about it on the podcast yet. So I was thinking to myself, I could make an entire episode about talking about SOMA. I think I can do that. It's not like my episodes are very long. I think that's a thing that I could do and possibly do. And it helps that I feel like I kind of recommend this game. I think I do. And we'll be discussing that today. But before I go too much further on, I just wanted to welcome you once again to a Hasty Podcast. We're a new podcast. It's a one-host show. It's just me here. I'm thinking about trying to take on guests in the future, but I have not yet, the way I see it, I've not yet made sure that I have this thing down, right? I feel like I haven't quite gotten my what's the word I'm looking for? Grip is the only word that's coming to mind. I haven't got a grip on this podcast. I haven't gotten into the groove of things yet, so I'm not ready to take on other guests just yet. But for the most part, it's a single host podcast featuring yours truly, myself, Weston, where we talk about video games, Netflix shows, and other things that interest me. Welcome. We've got a Patreon set up. I've had a Patreon for a while, but I've been trying to sort of tweak it and not rebrand it, but try to update it and modernize it. It's something that I've been very bad about, keeping it up to date, and I'm trying to do better about that. So if you're a staunch listener of the show, I do have a Patreon that you can support me at patreon.com/Weston Hasty. I also have an Anchor thing where you could do the same thing. You can, if you don't like Patreon, you can support me through Anchor as well. That link is at, oh God, hang on. I know the link. Anchor.fm/Hasty Podcast /support. You can check out all my different links at anchor.fm/Hasty Podcast. I just wanted to put those things out there because I have been working on setting them up. So it's kind of newsy. It's new to the podcast. If that's something you're interested in, financially contributing to the success of the podcast, then you can do that. If you are not interested in doing that, no worries, my friend. You are still welcome to listen to the podcast. I just wanted to mention it. Welcome. That's my big announcement. That's my news. SOMA. I'm going to make the first half of this podcast as spoiler-free as possible. And then the second half, it's spoiler warning down. So that's what you can do. If you haven't played the game yet and you're not sure what it is or what it's about or anything like that, then feel free to listen to the first half of this podcast. If you get through it and you're interested and don't want any spoilers, then you can back out then. But if you're like, I'm still interested, I don't mind spoilers, or you're like, I still want to play the game, but I don't care about spoilers, I would love to hear your thoughts or whatever. If you're someone like me who doesn't mind hearing spoilers before playing a game, I'm weird like that. We can talk about spoilers at some point, but then you can listen to the rest. So, SOMA. It's a game that I did start playing in Spooky Month for my YouTube channel, for my gaming YouTube channel where I do Let's Plays and streams. That's at youtube.com/magicmanmo. And we finished it in November. I started it in October. We did a couple streams of it. I thought it was going to be a really short game, which if I wasn't streaming it and kind of like, putting on a bit of a show for my viewers and that kind of thing, I think I could have gotten through it a little bit faster, but I thought it was going to be a really short game. I ended up taking 3 streams to beat it, and my last stream number 3, was like a 5-hour stream, because I thought I had like 2 hours of the game left, and it ended up being a lot more. So I probably put something like 10 to 12 hours into this game is probably what I put into it. Again, if you're playing it yourself, you could probably go through it a bit faster. So expect it to be probably on the shorter than 12-hour spectrum. I think when I originally looked it up on howlongtobeat.com, I think is the name of the website. There's this website I like to check out every now and again when I'm trying to figure out how long a game's going to be. And you can find it easily. Just go to Google, how long to beat, and then insert whatever game you're trying to look up. And that's usually the website that shows up. I think they listed it on average as a 5 to 6 hour game. I think I took twice as long as the average, roughly. So keeping that in mind, it's a bit on the shorter side. So I definitely recommend it on sale when possible. I think by the time this podcast is over, I think the Black Friday sale is over. I think it was like $6. Yes, it's $6. So if you're quick, if you hear this podcast in the morning, you might have time to swing over and buy it if you want to. I think it's normally a 30-hour game. But the experience is really cool. All right. I'm going to read you the Steam description of the game just to give you an idea of what Steam says about it. That way you don't have to Google that for yourself. From the creators of Amnesia, The Dark Descent, comes SOMA, a sci-fi horror game set below the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. Struggle to survive a hostile world that will make you question your very existence. It's rated overwhelmingly positive. It's from the Frictional Games crew. They developed it, and yes, that is kind of basically it, right? Like, that's a really good synopsis. Sometimes Steam descriptions aren't very good, but because it is kind of a mysterious horror game, that a lot of the game is wrapped in sort of vague clues about what's going on around you that you don't really start to piece together until you get much later into the game. But that's a pretty good start. Sci-fi horror, yes, it takes place in the... I was going to say near future, but it's a little further than a lot of near future games. It takes place at just after the turn of the 22nd century. It's 2104 at the time that you play the game for the most part. You play the game mostly in 2104. The very beginning of the game takes place in our actually recent past. In 2015, I believe it was, because I think the game at the very beginning takes place at the time that the game was actually released. The game was released back in 2015, so it's about a 5-year-old game. And I think your beginning of the story kicks you off right at 2015. You play as... what was the name of the guy? I want to say... I've already forgotten the name of the main protagonist. I feel like I want to say it started with an S, like Steve. But I don't think it was Steve. I'm going to call him Steve. I legit don't remember the name of our main character. I'm very bad with names. So we'll call him Steve. You start off as Steve. You find out right away at the beginning of the game. So I'm not going to say this is spoilers. You find out right at the beginning of the game that you are dying. You've been involved in some kind of accident, I feel like it was. I don't remember exactly the details of what happened, but it was terrible. You were involved in some kind of accident at some point in time. You have this debilitating brain injury, basically, where you have a bleeding brain. And you're being treated for it, but at the rate you're going, you have months to live at best. It's pretty serious. And you're still going about your daily life. You're still answering emails and texts and trying to get on with your life while going through and taking these procedures and treatments to try to counteract that. And you hear about this experimental procedure that is marketed to you as a more natural way to heal your brain. But it's very experimental, and you're signed up for it, and you're asked to come to this lab to have some work done, which, by the way, is very shady. You do show up to this lab. You have this email to show up at this place, and there's like no one in the lobby to greet you. Things are like in boxes and wrapped up, and it's clear that either someone's moving out of this lab or moving into this lab. You're not really sure what's going on, but I will say that everything seems very slapdash. I immediately was very suspicious of this procedure that we were signed up for, but at the same time, I mean, again, you're desperate. You're set to die soon, so you're willing to take on pretty much any risk, because what do you have to lose? And you meet up with this researcher / inventor of this brain scan machine type thing, and what it's going to do is scan your mind and your DNA and your genetics and that kind of thing to try to determine the best way, the best procedure to go about healing you. All right, and you can talk with the guy a little bit, and you kind of have the procedure explained to you. You get in the machine, he locks you up into it a little bit, and you put on this headset that starts scanning. And the next thing you know, when you wake up, you're in another world. You're confused. Everything's dark. You're not in the same room you were in. You're in a mysterious room. You have no idea what's going on. It's clear that something went horrible because things are crashed and things are not okay. The room is dark. You go around looking for the researcher that you had spoken to previously. You find yourself in what you start to piece together in underwater. This is the Atlantic Ocean part that I mentioned in the description of the game, so that's why I don't think this is a spoiler. You're kind of told this right away, right? You're underwater in this sub-ocean research facility, and things have gone horribly wrong. And you start piecing together that you're not in the same time or place. You start to, like I said, the game starts in 2015, you start finding research documents strewn about labeling that something horrible happened here, and it's the year 2104, something about some kind of apocalyptic event, and something about the AI on board this research lab going awry, and something about people acting strangely. You're not quite sure the details and the mystery behind what surrounds you. All you know is that you went in for a brain scan to try to cure your bleeding brain, and now you're thrown into this horror scenario where it seems like either the world is ending, this research lab's ending, your life is ending, everything is ending, and you want to survive. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it in terms of spoiler-free territory. Because the next part, if you remember the description of the game, struggle to survive a hostile world that will make you question your very existence. That is a heavy element into the game that I think as you discover details in the game yourself, you're going to want to come to some of your own conclusions. So I'm going to leave that part intentionally mysterious for you in the spoiler-free part of the podcast. What that means is very important to the game, but I will leave that up to you to discover for yourself. That's the narrative aspect. I've set you up for the game. There's a lot more of the game left. That's just the very beginning. Mechanically speaking, we can talk about the game. Mechanically speaking, it is very reminiscent of Amnesia: The Dark Descent. There is a difference, though. Amnesia: The Dark Descent seems to be a horror show. It's like a haunted house, right? You're in this mysterious castle or whatever, and you know you're being hunted by mysterious monsters, and you need to go find some mysterious man to murderize before you're murderized, right? It's like a haunted house, monster house scenario. SOMA is similar, because you're in this mysterious research facility. There are things out to get you, but it's a lot slower paced in some ways to Amnesia: The Dark Descent. I didn't feel that SOMA was very chasey like Amnesia: The Dark Descent was. If you're familiar with games like Outlast, its horror is kind of gory and brutal. Things are chasing you. It's high action, high pace. This is not like Outlast. Neither was Amnesia, but I just wanted to kind of give you another example of something that this game isn't. It's not Outlast. It's not high-octane horror. Much in the same way, Amnesia was kind of a slow burn that tried to get into your mind a little bit, how Amnesia tried to mess with sanity and sanity meters and that kind of thing. Soma does a similar thing, but instead of making sanity some sort of bar or meter that you have to worry about, it's more focused on actually making the psychological aspect of the horror organic to the player, him or herself, trying to make the player actually think about the consequences of your actions and the implications with the events that have taken place in the world yourself, as opposed to giving your character just some meter that you have to worry about mechanically. This game takes that aspect out. And honestly, I thought that was a more pleasant experience. I found Soma, as far as horror games go, I found Soma to be a far more pleasant horror game experience that I wasn't stressed about playing, but still intrigued me and interested me in the development of my understanding of the world. And in that regard, I thought the narrative of Soma was far more interesting and engaging to me than Amnesia was. So expect a slower burn in terms of horror elements in Soma. It's actually relatively light. It's a game that if you're not super into horror, I think you could probably still get into Soma and still have plenty of frights and tense moments and that kind of thing, but I don't think it's overwhelmingly so. So I recommend Soma both from a mechanic and a narrative standpoint. I think it's very well done, and I would love to talk more about the narrative and my thoughts on it. So that's going to conclude the spoiler-free synopsis of the game. If you're filled in and would like to hear more, stay tuned as I take a quick sip break. Coffee break! Sorry for the interruption, but I would like to tell you about today's sponsor, Anchor. What's Anchor, you ask? Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. So easy, in fact, that yours truly uses it. Anchor is free and easy to use. You can record and edit your entire podcast from your phone on Anchor's app or on your computer on Anchor.fm. What's more, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so that it is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and several other platforms. And once your podcast is up and running, you can begin making money from your podcast using Anchor's tools with no minimum listenership required. It's everything you need to make your podcast right now. Want to begin? Start by downloading the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Okay, coffee break over. All right. We're entering spoiler territory, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, this is your chance to back out. You can always come back to hear what else I have to say about the game. I don't have a ton of time to try to go into every detail about the game. Again, like I spent like a dozen hours in this game, so I spent a lot of time reading all the documents I could find, listening to all the audio tapes that there are in the game, trying to touch everything and exploring some of the ideas of the game through my way on stream. So if you're interested in watching my stream footage, they are on my YouTube channel. You can just go to YouTube and search Magic Man Mo Soma and you'll get some stuff from me. You can watch me play the game if that is something that you need to do in a more detailed every scene sort of basis. But to synopsis it, that's not a thing, on the podcast, suffice it to say that the core, the hook of this game is that questioning your very existence statement. That is overwhelmingly the draw to the narrative of this game. What you find out as you progress relatively quickly is that there is some kind of disconnect between regular, actual human beings and a number of these sort of robot things that you're finding throughout the game. You meet an android, robot, helper bot thing stuck on a conveyor belt, and it's like stuck there, and it's like screaming at you, help me, I'm stuck here, I need out of here. And you try to talk to him like, oh my god, you're a robot talking to me. And he's like, I'm not a robot, you're a robot. And you kind of have this weird back and forth that the two of you don't understand why the other doesn't understand who the robot is. And you pretty much accidentally end up, or intentionally end up, murdering that poor robot man on the conveyor belt in a very appalling scene. I feel like that's one of the earliest scenes, it might be the earliest scene, of you potentially, murdering someone. Because what you do find out is that robot was correct. That you like see yourself in a mirror and you find out you are indeed a robot. You're not Steven. I don't think that was your name. I don't remember what your name was. Steven, you're not Steven that you remember in 2015. You're in a robot body. And you do meet up with another human who is not a fleshy sack of human, but another robot human that dumps her brain into a machine so that you can kind of carry her around to get through the game with her without her having to follow you around with her physical body, which has sort of begun to dysfunction and can't really go on. Her name was Catherine. I think that was her name. I think I got that one right. Her name's Catherine, and she basically explains to you that that brain scan that you performed was one of the earliest inventions and tests of the inventor of this sort of uploading a copy of someone's brain information out there. You're one of the earliest templates ever made because you were at that sort of experimental research facility, right? And what is probably what happened is that you had your brain scanned. Original Steven went on, lived their life for a couple of months, like you expected, probably going through treatment like you expected, and the treatment failed, and you died. The original Steven is no more. They died back in 2015 and has been dead for almost 100 years. The character you're playing as now, at this point, is a copy of that Steven. As far as you know, because all of your memories and all of your behaviors and everything has been exactly replicated down to the DNA level, as far as you're aware, you might as well be the original. You have all the same thoughts. In terms of your existence, it feels like you went into that brain scan, came out, there was no time that passed in between. But there was time that passed between. You're a robot. So the question becomes, as you progress throughout this game, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to exist? What does it mean to be human at all? You meet several characters that are originally human, but are no longer human. Catherine being one of them. Her original copy went on to perform a very important project and hasn't been seen again or returned. The Catherine you're speaking to is a copy of that Catherine, and she, that copy, wants to continue to try to perform that project that copy Catherine suspects original Catherine failed to accomplish. See, SOMA takes place in a post-apocalypse where a comet has crashed into the Earth and wiped out all of humanity. Or at least as far as anyone in this research facility knows, and it seems pretty devastating. You can't make contact with the outside world. It's all destroyed. It's a post-apocalypse. One of the projects that the facility was working on apparently was some way to combat this comet, whether shooting it out of the sky or... We're a little unclear what it was they were attempting to do to try to prevent the extinction of all mankind. But one of the projects Catherine, the original Catherine, was working on was this project called the Ark. And the Ark is a project that copies everybody's brains possible, as many humans as possible. It seems like there could be quite it seems like there's only a couple dozen people that maybe got uploaded that you ever found out, but the idea was that as many people as possible that Catherine could get uploaded into this Ark, copying brain data over, so that functionally speaking, exact replicas of these people are existing in a digital space inside this Ark, which is kind of you see the Ark later. It's kind of this very large, kind of a small desk-sized machine. You can carry it in your hands, but it's very large, like a small chest, maybe. Maybe think of like a small pirate chest or something. It's kind of like that big, and she uploads all these copies into this Ark, and the plan is to shoot this Ark up into space as a satellite, where it will continue to use solar power to run for the next thousands of years. Something like 10,000 years it can run on its own, and mankind will go on to live digitally inside this Ark in a simulated virtual reality world for the next several thousand years. As far as anyone's concerned on the inside, it's as if that's just the real world. It's been built, so like a kind of like a paradise sort of situation, but it's not perfectly a paradise. Catherine wanted to make sure it's as realistic as possible, so they're not like living in some sort of pseudo heaven or anything like that, but it's got a natural world, it's got a city, it's got a number of different environments in that kind of thing to try to replicate living on as normal a life as possible, but digitally up in space. Of course, she wanted to get the Ark off the planet because we couldn't trust leaving the Ark here on Earth because it's falling apart, crumbling. It's been hit with a comet. God knows what could happen to the Ark over the next several thousand years. Up in space, where it can siphon energy from the sun and just circle around the sun for thousands of years, it's much less likely to be tampered with and destroyed, and humanity can go on living, quote-unquote living, for as long as possible. It really begs the question, like, is that the same thing as saving humanity or not? Especially in this context where there's no other option. The comet hit Earth. We can't stop it. Everyone's dead. There are no humans that are humans left alive on the planet. There's no other option. Is the Ark a good enough replacement for humanity, for mankind? And can we even still say that they are human? Or are they something else entirely? Are they just a pale reflection or shadow of what people left behind, regardless? And you kind of come to grips with that playing as one of those copies, right? You yourself are playing as a copy of a person who is alive. And as far as you care, you sense everything like a human would. You experience everything like a human would. Who gets to say that you're not human? And your character takes that pretty hard, trying to grapple with that concept of not being the original anymore. And the game does a good job of kind of dripping you this narrative over the length of the game. So much so that I was far more interested in seeing that played through than a lot of the horror elements of being chased around by this sentient AI. And I'm not sure why the sentient AI, it's called the WOW, W-A-U. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's an AI called the WOW. And its mission is to protect people. In this underwater facility, it ran like life support systems and that kind of thing to protect people, keep everyone healthy and happy. But now in the post-apocalypse, with everything falling apart, the WOW has kind of taken on a mind of its own that it was not originally programmed to do. In order to try to protect mankind, it has now begun synthesizing this sort of gel-like substance that it is using to take over machinery that it was not originally supposed to be in charge of, as well as other people that it's not supposed to be in charge of. You don't really understand what it's doing or why until towards the end. And at the end, you find out that in an attempt to just keep people alive, it is taking over people and turning them basically comatose. You see several people throughout the game that are just slathered with this gel, stuck up against a wall or against a computer or something like that. They're breathing, and this gel seems to be feeding them and keeping them alive, but like in the barest sense possible. They can't interact with you. They don't talk. They don't seem to be conscious in any way that is their own. It seems that the AI, in a desperate attempt to just keep them biologically alive, has completely turned people into these comatose abominations, or turn them outright into patrolling enemies that chase you down. I think the WOW, I suspect, we don't get a clear answer on this, I think the WOW determines you to be a threat to these people, and because you are not a living biological entity anymore, you're a copy inside a robot body, basically, it tries to destroy you. The WOW is out to destroy you because you are running around mucking things up. You're turning things on and off that you're not supposed to. If you do a few things like I did, you accidentally kill a few people. I mean, things happen, right? So the WOW is actively out to get rid of you because you are apparently actively out to thwart the WOW. So it does seem to fight you and combat you. And by the time you get to the end, you do have an option to turn off the WOW and destroy the WOW, because you're pursued by this quantum man who I don't know who he is. I think he's the Ross character. You'll meet the Ross character. This is going to mean nothing to you right now, but when you read all the texts and journals and that kind of thing, you start to piece together a number of different characters that were up to a number of shenanigans before the events that you actually take place in. And I think this Ross character, one of the researchers, somehow found a way to become this sort of pseudo-alive quantum man using the gel. He kind of phases in and out of existence. It's kind of wild. And not fully explained, because I think that information is lost, unless there's stuff that I didn't find. But he wants you to destroy the WOW because he believes the WOW is going to destroy all of mankind. Basically, with the gel and with sucking everybody up comatose into these just abominations of what used to be people. He wants you to destroy the WOW. And there is a bit of a moral question if that's true or not, because while the WoW is trying to keep them alive, who knows, as an AI, is it possible that it will find a way to bring people back to life? Because that's kind of what they look like they're doing. That kind of seems like that's what the AI is trying to do, but also, can it even do that? Also, this is a point I made while playing the game myself. Does it matter if you leave the WoW alive or not? Or around, not alive, but around, because there's no people left. Who cares if it keeps doing this? No human beings that are conscious and aware of their existence are still around to be tormented by the WoW, except for us, Catherine, and a number of maybe digitized people that are still around, but again, they're digitized. I mean, if you flip off a computer switch, they vanish just like that. If we never plugged Catherine back around, she's sitting in one of our PDAs. If we never plugged her back into a computer to talk to her, she literally ceases to exist. That's it. And she doesn't die, she doesn't feel pain, or she's not tormented by it when you take her out of a computer. She's just off. That's just the way it is. And that happens throughout the game. And she always seems very jarred when you plug her back into a computer, because to her perception, she's on and talking to you, and then you take her out of a computer and put her back in a computer. To her, no time has passed. So she goes from one moment to the next just completely abruptly. And it seems like it's a little jarring for her, but she handles it pretty well. Anyway, it's a very deep narrative that is kind of drip fed to you over time, that you have to kind of struggle with this idea of what it means to exist and what it means to be human, and whether or not it's okay to accept that outcome for humanity. Is that okay? The Ark project, do you believe in it? The WoW, should you destroy it or should you leave it running in case it finds a way to save people? I left it running because I thought destroying it might kill me, and I was trying to make sure that I could fire the Ark off, because I was trying to do the Ark. I wanted to go through my mission to help Catherine fire the Ark into space. And I didn't want to risk getting the bad ending or something like that by trying to destroy the WoW and then accidentally dying and never firing off the Ark. So I left the WoW alone, and the Quantum Man I was talking about tried to force me to destroy the WoW, but because I kept trying to refuse, the WoW had enough time to actually destroy the Quantum Man. And it seemed like the WoW was like, okay, you try to save me, now move on, leave. If you try to attack me, I'll destroy you. And I was like, okay, I'm out of here. And I left the WoW running. Was that the right move? Was that the wrong move? I don't know. I really don't know. I did get to the point where we could fire the Ark off into space. And turns out Catherine came through with us. She actually set it up so that we could scan our minds into the Ark, because we weren't uploaded to the Ark yet. We did that. We scanned ourselves into the Ark. It fires off into space, and we got left behind. A copy of each of us was put into the Ark, but we obviously are left behind because there's no actual transfer of consciousness. And our character, Steven, didn't seem to understand that. He thought his consciousness would transfer, and he gets very upset with Catherine and kind of goes crazy. And I think he accidentally breaks Catherine and is just alone on the planet to probably inevitably die, either to the WoW or to just natural disasters, because you are thousands of leagues under the sea or whatever. But you do switch over after that moment to what Copy you sees in the Ark, and you wander through and you meet up with Copy Catherine, which at this point it's actually Copy Steven and Copy Catherine, but it's kind of insinuated that you just go on living in this beautiful world for the foreseeable future. And it's a very mixed feeling right there at the end, that both you accomplished what you set out to do, but also left behind versions of yourself and others that are left on the planet to die one way or the other. And it's very somber at the end, but does a very good job of giving you pause to think about the implications of all these choices you made along the way. It's a very good game. Like I said, I played it on my YouTube channel. I'm well over my time, so I need to wrap this up by just saying SOMA. It's a game that does a very good job of actually trying to make the player think. I mean, if you didn't read anything, if you try to just blow through the game like you were playing Outlast or something, you're not playing the game right. You're not going to have the impact that it is designed to try to give you. It's not a game that's meant to be played mechanically. It's a game that's meant to be played narratively. So take your time in the game, explore everything, read everything, really put yourself in the game as much as possible. Like, really try to put yourself in the mind of the characters and the world and see how you feel about it, like kind of trying to translate that into your own world, into your own beliefs and what all that means. Do you agree with the characters' motives and morals? Do you disagree? I know I found myself very okay personally with the idea of shedding one's biological skin to preserve mankind as some sort of digital version. But I mean, other people might not be okay with that idea. And I think the nuance comes into the why and the context of the game. Is there a line where it does become okay because it's your only option? You do meet, I will say, you do meet one living, actual human being, the last living human being on the planet, and you do get to have a chat with her, and you get to decide what happens to her at the end. And it's really weird to face that face to face with her, trying to put yourself like in her shoes if you knew you were the last breathing human being on the planet. Like, just what kind of headspace that puts you in. Wild times. Anyway, like I say, I'm quite out of time. Thank you so much for listening to a Hasty Podcast. You can listen to me on everywhere. I mean, if you're listening to me, if you made it this far, you already know. You can listen to me on like Spotify and Breaker and Google Podcasts and Anchor. Thank you so much for listening. I have a Patreon at patreon.com/Weston Hasty. You can also support me at anchor.fm/Hasty Podcast /support. Or you can continue to support the podcast by just listening and sharing with your friends, letting other people know that I exist if this is something that interests you. Also, tweet me at Weston Hasty and use the hashtag Hasty Podcast, and I like to use tweets in some of my episodes, so don't be shy, say hey. But that's it for this podcast. Once again, thank you all so much for listening. I gotta head out of here. That's it. Take care of yourselves and wash your hands. All right, bye.